For those of us climbing to the top of the food chain, there can be no mercy. There is but one rule: hunt or be hunted.
That's right. We don't submit to terror. We make the terror.
Picture this. It's February 2013. You sit down on a Friday night, open Netflix, and the next thing you know, it's Sunday morning, and you've watched 13 episodes of a political thriller you'd never even heard of before the weekend started. That was House of Cards. And if you lived through it, you know exactly what that felt like. Frank Underwood staring directly into the camera. Breaking the fourth wall before that was even a thing people talked about. Telling you, not the other characters, you, exactly how power really works. It felt like a secret being whispered into your ear. Prestige television had never done anything quite like it. But here's the thing. By 2018, the show was dead. Not canceled because audiences left. Not canceled because the ratings crashed. Canceled because the man at the center of it was accused of sexual misconduct going back decades. And then the writer's room had to figure out how to finish a show about Washington's most ruthless operator without the actor who played him. And what's really wild, the show had already started dying before any of that happened. Today, we're going to walk through the complete story. The $100 million gamble that changed streaming forever. The uncanny political predictions that made reality feel like fiction. The behind-the-scenes chaos that most people never knew about. And the single most chaotic week in streaming history that ended it all. Before we get into it, if this is the kind of deep dive you're here for, do me a favor right now. Hit that hype button and like this video. And tell me what you remember about watching House of Cards for the first time in the comments. And if you want to be part of this community, behind-the-scenes content, early access, all of it, hit the join button and become a member. The button's right there. Now let's get into it. Part 1. The $100 million bet. To understand why House of Cards mattered so much, you have to understand what Netflix was in 2011. They were a DVD by mail company that had just survived the most humiliating self-inflicted corporate disaster in Silicon Valley history. The Quickster Rebacle, where they tried to split their business in two, lost 800,000 subscribers in a single quarter, and watched their stock price fall off a cliff. They desperately needed a reason to exist that wasn't just being the place you went to watch other people's movies. So their chief content officer, Ted Sarandos, made a bet that the entire industry thought was insane. Media Rights Capital had a package, an American remake of the beloved 1990 BBC political thriller House of Cards, with David Fincher attached to direct and Kevin Spacey attached to star. They shopped it to HBO, to Showtime, to AMC, to FX. Every single premium network in Hollywood passed, and every single one demanded a pilot first. Netflix said, no pilot. 2 full seasons, 26 episodes, sight unseen. Reportedly, over $100 million. Ted Sarandos made that call based on data. Netflix's algorithm showed massive overlap between fans of the original BBC series, Kevin Spacey movies, and David Fincher films. He wasn't guessing. He was reading subscriber behavior. Reed Hastings, Netflix's co-founder, admitted he wasn't comfortable with it at the time. It felt, in his words, perilously aggressive. But Sarandos pushed it through, and the creative package they were betting on was genuinely stacked. Fincher directed the first 2 episodes and set the entire visual DNA of the show. Cold, steely blues, that pulsing electronic score from Jeff Beal, and most importantly, the direct address to camera that made Frank Underwood feel less like a TV character and more like someone confiding in you specifically. Showrunner Beau Willimon brought real political experience. He'd worked on campaigns for Chuck Schumer, Howard Dean, and Hillary Clinton. His play Farragut North had already been turned into Clooney's Ides of March. He understood that world from the inside. And Kevin Spacey, 2-time Oscar winner, one of the most magnetic actors of his generation, was playing Francis Underwood with a controlled menace that television hadn't seen before. The man could say more with a 5-second pause than most actors could say in a monologue. On February 1st, 2013, Netflix dropped all 13 episodes of Season 1 simultaneously. The entire industry held its breath. It worked. The stock jumped roughly 70% within a week. Netflix added over 3 million subscribers in that first quarter alone. By 2015, the show had earned 56 primetime Emmy nominations across its run, with 7 wins. David Fincher won the Emmy for Outstanding Directing for the pilot, the first Emmy ever awarded for a streaming-only episode. Robin Wright won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in 2014, the first Golden Globe ever won for a streaming-only series. Kevin Spacey won the following year. By late 2017, Netflix had 117 million subscribers and an $85 billion market cap, worth more than Fox, CBS, and Viacom combined. And House of Cards was the cornerstone that proved the whole thing could work. It didn't just launch Netflix's prestige era. It launched the entire concept of streaming as a legitimate home for serious television. Part 2. The show that saw the future. Here's where things get genuinely fascinating and a little unsettling. House of Cards wasn't just great drama. It was a funhouse mirror pointed directly at real American politics. And the reflections were sometimes so accurate, they made people uncomfortable. Frank Underwood was modeled partly on LBJ. A photograph of the famous Johnson treatment actually hangs in Underwood's office, and Frank is shown reading Robert Caro's LBJ biography. Williman confirmed it in interviews. In terms of political figures, someone we keep going back to for inspiration is LBJ. Same Southern congressman background, same mastery of the back room, same capacity for both genuine idealism and complete ruthlessness. Same rise to the presidency, without ever winning a national election. But the Clinton parallels ran even deeper, and you can probably feel why, given that Williman worked on Hillary Clinton's Senate campaign. Bill Clinton himself gave the show one of its most quoted endorsements. He told Kevin Spacey directly, 99% of what you do on that show is real. The 1% you get wrong is you could never get an education bill passed that fast. The Clintons reportedly binge-watched season 1 in 3 days. Claire Underwood's trajectory, First Lady with independent policy ambitions, UN ambassador, vice presidential candidate, ultimately president, tracked Hillary Clinton's entire career arc in fiction before it played out in reality. Michael Dobbs, the author of the original novel, said it himself. Hillary, she is a political figure in her own right, behind the scenes, but now increasingly in front of the scenes. That is much more of a Claire character. And then there was President Obama. At a dinner with tech executives in 2013, he quipped, "I wish things were that ruthlessly efficient. I was looking at Kevin Spacey and thinking, man, this guy's getting a lot of stuff done." He impersonated Frank Underwood in a White House video. At the correspondents' dinner, he told Robin Wright, "I just want you to know, I'm not as bad as Francis." Then pointing to Michelle, "She, on the other hand, is more like you." Season 3 introduced Viktor Petrov, same initials as Vladimir Putin, same KGB background, same authoritarian grip, same anti-LGBT policy positions, same penchant for shirtless masculine photo ops. The show had members of Pussy Riot playing themselves confronting Petrov at a White House dinner. This aired in 2015. By 2016, it felt less like political fiction and more like a documentary someone had accidentally released too early. And Season 5, before the scandal, before anyone outside the production knew what was coming, featured manufactured terrorism fears being used to suspend elections, travel bans, an administration whipping up nationalist panic, and protesters in the streets holding "Not My President" signs. Critics at the time called it ripped from the headlines. Here's the thing, the episodes were written in 2016, during the Trump campaign. The writers weren't predicting the future. They were watching the same present everyone else was watching, and taking it seriously. Netflix's marketing leaned directly into the convergence. The FU 2016 campaign aired what looked exactly like a real political ad during the most watched Republican presidential debate in history, nearly 30 million viewers, and revealed only in the final seconds it was for Frank Underwood. Hashtag FU 2016 trended nationally. Frank Underwood's presidential portrait was unveiled at the actual Smithsonian. The line between the show and reality had essentially dissolved. By season 5, Michael Kelly, who played Doug Stamper, captured the paradox perfectly. If we created that character of Donald Trump, People would be like, come on, there's no way that guy exists. Robin Wright put it even more simply. He's stolen all of our ideas for season 6. Part 3. The slow leak. Here's what nobody wants to talk about, but the numbers don't lie. The show was already declining before the scandal, and if you watched it, you felt it. Look at the Rotten Tomatoes trajectory. Season 1, 87%. Season 2, 83%. Season 3, 73%. Season 4 recovered to 86%. Then Season 5, 72% on RT and a 60 on Metacritic. The worst critical reception in the show's history. The fundamental structural problem was one the show couldn't solve. Frank Underwood's relentless climb was the engine, the scheming, the manipulation, the ruthless moves 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It all worked because there was somewhere to go. But once Frank became president at the end of Season 2, the machine ran out of fuel. Where do you go from the top? USA Today's Michael Wolff landed the most brutal review of Season 3. No good, not just no good, but incompetent, a shambles, lost. Critics who had championed the show started questioning whether it had ever been as clever as they thought, or whether the thrill of the premise had masked shallower storytelling than they'd noticed. Then Beau Willimon left. In January 2016, Netflix announced Season 5 would happen, and Willimon was out. The official line was that he chose to step down. Deadline reported the circumstances were not as clear-cut, and that his exit was likely not entirely voluntary. Either way, the man who'd built the show's voice in politics from the ground up was gone. His replacements, Melissa James Gibson and Frank Pugliese, had written for the show, but they weren't Willimon. The Metacritic score between Seasons 4 and 5 dropped 16 points. That's a cliff, not a slope. Meanwhile, Netflix's own content was eating House of Cards alive. Stranger Things debuted in 2016 and drew an estimated 15.8 million viewers in its first week. House of Cards Season 4 drew around 8.8 million for the season, 6th among Netflix originals. The show that had defined Netflix's prestige identity was no longer its most important show. It had been lapped. The writing was already on the wall before October 2017. The scandal didn't kill a show in peak health. It torched a show that was already in decline. And that distinction matters for understanding what actually happened. Part 4. The Open Secret. This is the part of the story that makes the whole collapse feel even more inevitable in hindsight. Long before Anthony Rapp came forward, Kevin Spacey's behavior on the House of Cards set was what multiple sources later described as an open secret. A BuzzFeed investigation found crew members widely knew about a pattern of inappropriate conduct. One crew member warned new hires directly. If Spacey invites you to play video games in his trailer, you bring someone with you. He had power that made challenges almost impossible. He was both the star and an executive producer. He was Netflix's flagship. The show's success was tied to his face. MRC later confirmed that during the very first season, in 2012, before a single episode had aired, someone on the crew filed a complaint about a specific remark and gesture from Spacey, and that he underwent a training process as a result. A training process. In 2012. And the show kept going for 5 more seasons. Robin Wright was fighting her own battle alongside all of this. Spacey was earning $500,000 per episode. Wright was earning approximately $420,000. In 2016, she went public about it, and her approach was exactly as direct as you'd expect from someone who played Claire Underwood for years. I was like, I want to be paid the same as Kevin. You better pay me, or I'm going to go public.
I was like, I want to be paid the same as Kevin. And I was like, you better pay me, or I'm going to go public.
And they did. Except they didn't. Not really. Producers told her they couldn't match Spacey's acting salary because she hadn't won an Academy Award. Instead, they gave her executive producer and director credits, separate paychecks that were meant to approximate equal total compensation. By 2017, Wright told a magazine she still didn't believe she was being paid the same. I don't think so, she said. I was told I was getting a raise, but I don't think so. 2 people at the center of the same show, one being paid less and told she wasn't, the other with a pattern of behavior that multiple people knew about, but nobody stopped. That's the context into which October 29th, 2017 arrived. Before we get to the week that blew everything up, if this video is hitting, I need you to hit that like button right now. It's the single biggest thing you can do to help this channel grow. And if you're not subscribed yet, click on subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because the final chapter of this story is something else. Part 5. 7 Days in October. On October 29th, 2017, BuzzFeed News published actor Anthony Rapp's account that in 1986, when Rapp was 14 years old and Spacey was 26, Spacey had invited him to a party at his New York apartment, picked him up, Rapp's words, like a groom picks up the bride, laid on top of him, and made a sexual advance. Rapp had shared a version of the story, with Spacey's name redacted, in a 2001 interview with The Advocate. Now his name was on it. Spacey's response came the same day, and it became one of the most condemned public statements in entertainment history. He said he was beyond horrified, that he didn't remember the encounter, and that he owed Rapp the sincerest apology for what would have been deeply inappropriate drunken behavior. All of that was already a masterclass in non-denial. But then he pivoted. I choose now to live as a gay man. The conflation of a sexual misconduct allegation involving a 14-year-old child with a coming-out statement landed like a grenade. GLAAD issued a statement immediately. Coming-out stories should not be used to deflect from allegations of sexual assault. Actor Zachary Quinto called it a calculated manipulation. The backlash wasn't from one direction. It came from everywhere, simultaneously. Then the dominoes fell. Fast. October 30th, Netflix representatives arrived at the Baltimore production set. Netflix announced House of Cards would end with Season 6, before a single additional allegation had been published. November 2nd, CNN published accounts from 8 House of Cards crew members describing a toxic environment of predatory behavior, non-consensual touching, crude sexual comments, forced physical contact. One production assistant alleged Spacey sexually assaulted him while driving him to set. That same day, Spacey's publicist dropped him. His agency CAA dropped him. November 3rd, Netflix officially cut ties. All future involvement with Kevin Spacey, including the nearly completed Gore Vidal biopic, was over. In Q4 2017, Netflix took a $39 million write-down for unreleased content we've decided not to move forward with. Their CFO confirmed it was tied to the societal reset around sexual harassment. He noted the company hadn't experienced a write-down of that magnitude before. The International Academy of Television Arts and Sciences withdrew the Founders Award they had planned to present to Spacey in November. MRC's internal investigation ultimately found that Spacey had violated their harassment policy with respect to 5 crew members across the show's 5 seasons. At his 2022 civil trial in Manhattan, a jury found Spacey not liable for Rapp's specific allegations. Spacey wept on the stand and expressed regret over the 2017 statement.
Why were you crying today, Mr. Spacey?
It was never my intention to deflect, he said. The Massachusetts criminal case had been dropped in 2019. He was acquitted of all charges at his London criminal trial in July 2023. But in August 2022, a judge confirmed an arbitrator's ruling that Spacey must pay MRC $31 million for breaching his contract by violating their anti-harassment policy. In early 2024, that judgment was reduced to $1 million under a settlement in which Spacey agreed to cooperate with MRC's insurance litigation and hand over his medical records. Which brings us to the most recent chapter. On March 10th, 2026, this month, Spacey testified in a California courtroom in the ongoing MRC versus Fireman's Fund trial, and confirmed that after checking into the Arizona treatment facility, the Meadows, in December 2017, he had been formally diagnosed with sexual compulsive behavior. He read the psychiatric summary aloud from the witness stand. When asked if he had any medical basis to dispute the diagnosis, he said no. He added that he could personally dispute it, but not professionally. 7 days in October 2017, and a trail of legal proceedings that's still running 9 years later. Part 6. Claire's Show. Now here's the part of this story that deserves more respect than it gets. When Netflix executives debated whether to cancel season 6 entirely, rather than attempt to finish it without Spacey, it was Robin Wright who pushed back hardest. She was thinking about the 2,500 crew members who would lose their jobs. "I was just like, no, it's not right. This is a job, and we're going to finish it out as we intended," she told Variety. The restructuring was enormous. 8 scripts had been completed, and the entire season storyboarded around Spacey's character. Showrunners Gibson and Pugliese scrapped all of it. Frank Underwood dies off screen between seasons. The circumstances left deliberately murky, true to the show's DNA. Claire becomes the sole protagonist. The season was cut from 13 episodes to 8. Production resumed January 31st, 2018. They wrapped in May. Season 6 premiered November 2nd, 2018. The critical reception was split. Supporters praised Wright's performance as commanding and controlled, calling her the show's secret superweapon, finally unleashed. Critics argued that without Spacey's particular brand of theatrical menace, the whole thing felt like an imitation of itself. The Rotten Tomatoes score settled at 65%, the lowest in the show's history. The audience score on the same platform was 19%. Viewership dropped significantly from Season 5's premiere. The show that had once beaten NFL primetime numbers went out not with a bang, but with an argument. And here's the genuinely uncomfortable creative question at the heart of Season 6. Was it that the show was bad without Spacey? Or was it that audiences couldn't separate what had happened from what they were watching? The most honest answer is probably both. The writing was uneven, but the shadow over the whole production was impossible to ignore. Part 7. What it left behind. Here's what House of Cards really was. When you step back from everything, it was proof that streaming could do prestige television. Before February 2013, nobody had proved that. Netflix had data. Ted Sarandos had instincts. But there was no evidence an internet company could produce something that stood next to HBO or AMC's best work and hold its own. House of Cards proved it, and everything that followed, The Crown, Stranger Things, Ozark, every streaming series that became a cultural moment, exists partly because of that proof of concept. As Variety's Daniel D'Addario put it, without House of Cards priming audiences and talent for what streaming could be, top-tier creators might never have taken the risk. The scandal changed the industry too. Spacey's House of Cards contract contained no morality clause. The industry moved aggressively to close that gap. Within months of October 2017, studios across Hollywood were inserting language allowing termination if talent engaged in conduct that resulted in adverse publicity. The Spacey situation established the template for how streaming companies would handle misconduct. Sever ties, absorb the financial loss, move on. And the show itself. It sits in an uncomfortable place in the television canon, universally acknowledged as one of the most industry-transforming series ever made, permanently shadowed by what happened. Difficult to recommend without the asterisk, Robin Wright has moved forward. Her career has only grown. She directed her own feature film, won directing credits on Ozark, and earned Golden Globe and Critics' Choice nominations in 2025. When she reflected on the show's origins at the Monte Carlo Television Festival that year, she said, "When David Fincher introduced it to me, he said, 'This is going to be the future. It's going to be revolutionary.' And look where we are now." Kevin Spacey is, as of this month, still in a California courtroom, testifying in a case about whether an insurance company owes MRC money for the damage his departure caused. His Baltimore home was foreclosed. When Piers Morgan asked him in 2024 how much money he had left, he answered with one word: none. So that's the full story. Netflix's $100 million bet that built an empire. A show that was so politically accurate, it made the White House uncomfortable. A creative slide that started before anyone outside the production knew what was coming. A payment battle that played out in public. An open secret that finally became a front-page story. And a final season built in 8 weeks from rubble. House of Cards didn't just fall, it burned. And the heat reshaped the entire industry around it. Now I want to hear from you. What was your relationship with this show? Were you one of the people who watched the whole first season in a weekend? Did you feel the decline before the scandal hit? And what do you make of the legal proceedings still running in 2026? Does any of it change how you think about the show itself? Drop all of it in the comments. I read every single one. If this video gave you the full picture you were looking for, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications because I've got more stories like this coming. Shows that collapsed at their peak, franchises destroyed by the people running them, and the business decisions that killed things audiences loved. Trust me, there's more where this came from.